You know the figure I'm talking about, right? The one that haunts our nightmares. Pale skin, sharp fangs, a creature of the night with a terrifying thirst for blood. The vampire. It's a myth that has fascinated us for centuries. But what if the origin of this monster wasn't supernatural at all? What if it was tragically, heartbreakingly human?
This was the whisper that spread like wildfire across medieval Europe. Just a simple, chilling phrase, but it captured this deep-seated fear of the unknown. You know, a fear of what happens after we die, and of those who seem to be trapped somewhere in the shadows between life and the grave.
Okay, so to get to the real story, we first have to unpack the legend. Let's start with the classic monster we all think we know.
Yeah, this checklist is probably super familiar, right? They hate the sun, they feed on the living, they've got this unnatural power, and you can't see them in a mirror. These are the traits that basically define the vampire as the ultimate enemy, a demon that had to be hunted down and destroyed.
But you gotta remember, these stories weren't just for scaring people around a campfire. Back then, in a time before modern science, the vampire myth was actually a tool. It gave people answers for things they just couldn't explain. A sudden plague, a mysterious sickness, or why a body might not decay like it's supposed to. It was a way to create some kind of order out of absolute chaos.
And this is where the whole story pivots. This is where it all changes. What if the source of this centuries-old horror wasn't some demon or an ancient curse, but a real person who is suffering from a terrible and completely misunderstood illness?
To really get this, let's just imagine someone from that time living in a small village. We'll call him Vlad. Now, Vlad wasn't a monster. He was a patient. And he was suffering from a condition that would, without him ever knowing, inspire the very first chapter of the vampire legend.
The condition that a person like Vlad would have had is called porphyria. It's a rare genetic disorder, and its symptoms, well, they're just devastating. Without any modern medicine to explain it, the effects it had on the human body would have seemed like something straight out of a nightmare.
Okay, so this is where the myth and the medical reality line up with terrifying clarity. It's really incredible when you see it. The vampire's hatred of daylight, that's extreme photosensitivity, a key symptom of porphyria where sunlight causes horribly painful burns. That deathly pale skin, a direct result of severe anemia. And those infamous fangs? Tragically, that was likely just severely receding and bleeding gums that made the teeth look longer. Even the craving for blood can be explained as the body's desperate, instinctual need for iron. Leaving a nocturnal life wasn't some evil choice, it was a medical necessity. To avoid the sun, every single supernatural trait had a real, painful human cause.
So, a person like Vlad lived a life of absolute agony and isolation. But their story didn't end with their death. No. In fact, what happened after they died is what truly transformed their suffering into a superstition for the ages.
Just imagine this scenario playing out. First, the person dies from their illness. Then, years later, maybe there's a plague, and the fearful villagers start digging up graves, desperate for answers. What they find is a body that seems weirdly preserved, maybe because of the soil, with what looks like blood around the mouth from the gum disease. Now, to a pre-scientific society, the evidence seems clear, and it's terrifying. The tragic human story was completely erased, and in its place, a monster was born.
And with those words, that was it. A medical tragedy was cemented as a supernatural legend. The complete misunderstanding of how a body looked in death became proof that it was undead, that it was the cause of their suffering, and that it was a creature to be feared and destroyed.
You know, this transformation wasn't just some quirky piece of folklore. It had a real and truly devastating human cost. Not just for one person, but for countless others who came after.
Just think for a second about what was truly lost here. An individual's entire life lived in constant pain from what is now a treatable condition. A life that was defined by isolation and fear, not by evil. Their dignity, even in death, was stolen. And any chance for compassion was completely replaced by a myth that gave people a license to persecute.
And that's the real danger of these kinds of myths, isn't it? This story became the template. After this, anyone who seemed different, anyone with pale skin, anyone who had to avoid the sun, anyone who was an outsider could be slapped with the label vampire. The myth became a weapon.
So all of this brings us to a final thought. When we strip away all the superstitions, what we're left with isn't a monster at all. It's a profoundly human story of suffering and misunderstanding.
And that really is the question to end on, isn't it?
The entire vampire legend was born from an illness that made someone an outcast. It kind of forces us to ask ourselves, as we look at our own world, who are the people we've turned into monsters, simply because we haven't taken the time to understand their reality.